In today's video, I'm going to be continuing my journey through the Mages Guild questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Last time, I joined the faction and received orders directly from Ajira at the Balmora Hall. Most of the tasks involved helping her with her research and ultimately ascension to journeyman rank. Once she couldn't give me anything more, I traveled over to the Aldrun Hall and began to receive orders from Edwina Elbert. She had me run a lot of errands and fetch a couple of books regarding the Dwemer. Lastly, I returned to the Balmora Hall and discovered Sharn Grimuzgob's secret, that she's a necromancer. In exchange for my silence, she taught me a new conjuration spell. This is where the journey continues. Returning to the Aldrun Hall and seeking out Edwina once more, I asked her for more duties. She told me that there was nothing left for someone of my rank. Remembering though that Skink and Treeshade once said that I could go to him if I ever needed something to do, that's exactly what I did. Taking the teleportation services and arriving at the Wolverine Hall, I spoke with the Argonian. Asking him for some orders, he tells me that he needs somebody to escort the scholar, Tenyeminwe. Inquiring about this person, Skink says that she's currently staying at Marielle's Corner Club. She's apparently concerned about a recent encounter she had with a member of House Telvanni. Tenyeminwe wants to get out of Sadrith Mora on the elderscrolls, a ship owned by Galzarethi, but she's afraid to make the trek to the docks alone. Exiting the conversation, I left the Wolverine Hall and entered inside of the Corner Club. The Altmer was standing right in front of the doorway, and I spoke with her. She asked if I was ready to travel together, and I told her to follow me. For clarification, I asked which ship the elderscrolls was, and she told me it was on the west side. Together, we ran through town. I made it a point to look over my shoulder often in case any trouble arose. Things went smoothly though, and after passing through the Gateway Inn, we made it safely to the docks. Speaking with her one last time, she was grateful for my services, and when asked about traveling together, she gifted me a scroll of Summon Flame Atronach and a scroll of Summon Frost Atronach, citing that she was worried she might have had to use them on this trek. Returning back to Skink at the Wolverine Hall, he asked if Tenyeminwe made it there safe, and I told him yes, to which he gave me his thanks. With that, thus ends the quest, Escort Tenyeminwe. Speaking again with Skink, I asked for more duties. He told me that he was looking for a rare book called Vampires of Vvardenfell. Apparently, there are 2 books in the series. The first one is fairly easy to come by, as most booksellers are likely to have a copy. The second one, however, is more difficult. He asks me to go looking for Volume 2 and suggests starting my search with a rare bookseller. Repeating my search process from a few quests ago, I traveled to Aldrun and paid a visit to Cotus Colonus. And wouldn't you know it, as history repeats itself, he told me that Jobasha and Vivek might have a copy. Using the guild teleportation services, I ended up in the Foreign Quarter and descended to the lower wasteworks. When asked about the book, Jobasha said that if the temple knew he had it, there was a very good chance he could get punished, which I found to be most interesting. Purchasing it from him, I wanted to take a quick read as to see what all the hubbub was about. It details how in the East, aka Morrowind, there is no cure for vampirism, and any who have been afflicted with the disease and have not gotten treated within the 3-day window should be seen as radical sadists. However, in some of the western provinces, there are talks of a cure, and those who have been treated actually take the fight against the undead abominations. The book details that there was even a buoyant armiger in Morrowind who was cured of the disease, Galar Rathari, although the temple and the province mocked him and threw him in jail for heresy, to which he later recanted and served out the rest of his days at the Hall of Wisdom. An interesting read, I put down the book and returned back to Skink. Handing over Volume 2 of Vampires of Vvardenfell, he was happy to receive it and noted that it was also in good condition. He compensated me with 1,000 septums to cover the expenses, and with that, thus ends the quest, Vampires of Vvardenfell, Volume 2. Asking the Argonian for more duties, he said that he would like to speak with one of the wise women of the Ashlander tribes, and asked me to arrange a meeting. He doesn't suggest trying the Urshilaku or the Arabinimsum tribes, but does recommend maybe the Ahamusa first, and then the Zenib second. When asked about the Ahamusa, Skink notes them as living far to the northeast, and offers the best directions on how to get there. Exiting the Wolverine Hall, I made way for the docks and took a ship to Telmora. From Telmora, I leapt and levitated my way to the Ashlander camp. Entering inside of the wise woman's yurt, I spoke with Sinamu Mirpal. Asking her to meet with Skink and Treeshade, she said that she personally wouldn't do it. However, Mirpal would consider sending her apprentice, Minabibi. It's apparently time for her to see how foreigners live, and she wants her to leave her so-called childish notions behind. Mirpal tells me that she's currently in the Favel ancestral tomb. When asked about these childish notions, the wise woman says that Minabibi doesn't respect the Ashlander ways. She's too friendly to every foreigner, and Sinamu doesn't think she's cut out to be a wise woman. When asked about the Favel tomb, she gives me directions on how to best get there. Hugging the coast and traveling west, I passed by some Daedric ruins and soon landed on a camp of exiled Ahamusa that Mirpal warned me about. Continuing onwards, I got really close to the Ashlands themselves, which I was told would be too far west if I went any further, but just before them was the Favel tomb. Entering inside, I descended down some stairs, and just past the first door was a friendly Dunmer woman. Speaking with her, it turned out to be Minabibi. Attempting to arrange a meeting with Skink, she told me that she'd talk with him, but first, she needs to finish with her duties here. Sinamu sent Minabibi here as punishment, and she was tasked with calming an angry spirit. However, she's had no luck. She asks me to finish the job for her by finding the angry spirit known as Kanit Asher Nisamis and putting it down once and for all. Exiting the conversation, I went through the doors just past her and began to battle with a Bone Lord. The next door led me to the area of interest, and inside was the spirit itself, along with a skeleton. Defeating them both, I quickly checked around for loot before returning back to Minabibi. Upon doing so though, she recognized what I had done for her and agreed to meet with Skink. However, she had to quickly finish up with some of her duties here, and asked me to bring the news of her deeds back to the wise woman. Leaving the tomb and traveling back to the Ahamusa, I told Sinamu Mirpal that the spirit of Kanat had been laid to rest. She wanted to know though if that was my doing or Minabibi's. Telling her the truth, I received a disposition increase of 20, and Mirpal completely dismissed Minabibi as her apprentice, giving her full permission to meet with Skink. Recalling back to the Wolverine Hall and speaking with the Argonian, I told him of my success with the Ashlander tribe. He thanked me for my efforts and said that the ex-Ahamusa has already answered a lot of his questions. With that, thus ends the quest, meeting a wise woman. Asking Skink for more duties, he goes on a rant and says that when a mage turns to necromancy, it reflects poorly on the entire guild. When asked about the necromancy, he tells me that Talura Ulver, a former member of the Mages Guild, has become a necromancer. She apparently can be found in the caves of Shal. When asked about them, he gives me directions on how to best get there, starting off in Hala Oad, taking the guild teleportation services to Vivek, and from there, hopping on a boat to the fishing village, I began to walk north. Crossing over the first wooden bridge, I soon located the second one to the west, and shortly thereafter, found the entrance into Shal. Shal was a fairly small cave. It mostly consisted of one walkway, which held a skeleton and a Bone Lord. At the end of it was a trapdoor, and on the other side was the aforementioned necromancer, Talura Ulver. She started off by summoning a greater bone walker to aid her. After battling it a couple of times, I was able to get in close and start swinging away at her. Soon enough, Talura was defeated, and she had some decent loot, treasures, and consumables in her personal area. Once done cleaning house, I recalled back to the Wolverine Hall and reported back to Skink. Informing him of her death, he didn't revel in it, but called it a necessary action, and ended with saying that I've proven myself to the guild. With that, thus ends the quest, kill necromancer Talura Ulver. Speaking again with Skink, I asked him for more duties, and he told me that that was it for him until I've reached the rank of wizard. So, leaving the Wolverine Hall, I traveled back to Balmora and talked with Rannis Athris, the steward of the hall. She mentioned that she didn't have any work for an associate. However, she did propose that I might be ready for an advancement. Shooting up to the rank of apprentice and then journeyman, I tried again for duties. This time, she had something for me. In fact, 2 different tasks. The first one involved convincing an ex-House Telvanni member to join the guild, and the other involved collecting guild dues from someone named Manwe. For the first matter of business, the Telvanni's name is Larar Bariloth, and he can apparently be found in some place called Sulapund. Rhaenys tells me that if he can't be convinced, I should just go ahead and kill him. Now, as for the second matter of business, collecting guild dues from Manwë, she's apparently located in the caves of Punabi, which is really close to Sulapund, so Rhaenys thinks it's best to kill two birds with one stone. When asked about the dues, Athris informs me that Manwë hasn't paid them in years, and has now racked up a total of 2,000 septums. If she can be convinced to pay up, I'll get to keep half of it. Otherwise, Athris says that she too can be killed. In terms of how to get to these places, the Dark Elf tells me to head east, past Fort Moonmoth, the Dwemer Ruins, and Mirandus, the old Dunmer stronghold. From there, both Sulapund and Punabi can be located fairly easily. Exiting the conversation, I left the guild hall and began my journey. Leaping and levitating through the Molag Amur region, I mostly ran into several nuisance creatures, which only prolonged my trip. Eventually, I found myself nearing the northern shores of a lake, and from there, spotted the Velothi Tower of Sulapun. Entering inside, I readied myself for battle as I wasn't sure what to expect. Working my way through the corridors, I soon spotted some NPCs. They were friendly and didn't attack on sight, or anything of the sort, so I lowered my weapon. Casing the area and ascending up some stairs, I finally located the ex-Telvanni, Larar Berloth. Speaking with him, I asked if he would join the Mages Guild, and he questioned if he looked like a fool. He told me to collect dues from someone else, or to at least give him a reason he should be listening to any of this. This is where there are multiple options. The first is to attack and kill him. Doing so doesn't incite hostility from any of the other NPCs. The other option is to raise his disposition past 70 and try again. This time, he responds by asking that if he joins the guild, his research will be left alone. If so, he then agrees to enlisting in the faction the next time he's in Balmora. Regardless of the method chosen, Rhaenys will be pleased. Thus ends the quest, recruit or kill Larar Berloth. Taking my leave from Sulapund, I followed the second part of Athris' directions and brought myself over to the stronghold of Mirandus. Orienting myself with the proper directions, I took the road leading northeast and quickly happened across the entrance into Punabi. Going on inside, Manwë could be found pretty much immediately into the expedition. Speaking with the Dunmer, I asked her for her guild dues. Because her disposition was already over 60, she served me the question that if she paid her 2,000 septums of owed money, in exchange would I and the rest of the guild leave her alone, as she cannot leave her research unattended. Again, there are a couple of options to choose from here. Selecting no, she says she should have expected as such from one of the lower races. This is where Manwë can be attacked and killed. Fulfilling the quest, and Rhaenys would be none the wiser on the details. However, she doesn't have nearly as much coin on her, and the reward is significantly lessened. Another option is to revert back and accept Manwë's terms. She'll hand over the full amount and ask you to leave right away, as her and her colleagues are very deep into their research, and her partners may not be so understanding about the disruption. Lastly, if your disposition with her is low, she'll tell you that she actually left the guild and has since dedicated her life's work to studying the adaptive responses of quaternary variations in Oblivion streams. Manwë ultimately refuses to pay up and suggests that you scrounge up the drakes elsewhere in order to please Rhaenys. Again, this could lead you back to option 1 of killing her, or you could just go and pay the dues yourself. My canon event was collecting her debt. Returning back to Rhaenys, she asked me if I had convinced Berloth to join the guild, and if I had collected Manwë's dues. Answering the former first, she called it good work and expressed intrigue on if he would divulge any secrets regarding the house. As a reward, she gives me 4 quality Restore Magicka potions. As for the latter, I inform her of Manwë's compliance and hand over the 2,000 septums. As promised, she gave me back half and said that she knew I could be relied on. With that, thus ends the quest, Manwë's dues. Speaking again with Rhaenys and asking her for more duties, she informs me that there's an Argonian at the South Wall Corner Club who's offering unsanctioned training in restoration. Athris wants him stopped immediately. Leaving the hall and traveling across town, I entered inside of the Corner Club and descended to the lower levels. Here, I spotted an Argonian clad in some mage's robes named Only He Stands There. Speaking with him and asking about training, he'll say that he has no clue what you're talking about. When prompted to put an end to the unsanctioned training though, he offers an interesting proposition in return. He says that if I were to go and simply just tell Rhaenys that he stopped the unsanctioned training, he would offer me some in return. From here, there are a few options. The first is to agree to his terms. Returning back to Rhaenys and lying to her, she expresses joy that the training has been put to an end. Returning back to the Corner Club and speaking with the Argonian, he now offers training in mysticism, alteration, and restoration. Option 2 is to decline his bribe. If your disposition isn't high enough, he asks you to reconsider, but also mentions that he can still be convinced to stop. From here, he could be attacked and killed. Casting Frenzy and defeating him, Rhaenys can then be returned to, and as a reward for your efficiency, she'll gift you 4 scrolls of Elemental Burst Fire. The last option is to raise only He Stands There's disposition and decline his bribe again. This time, he gets the message and vows to stop his unsanctioned training, citing that he won't interfere with Rhaenys' quote-unquote authority anymore. Returning back to the Guildhall and speaking with the Dunmer, you'll get the same response as you would have received if you had just lied to her. Whatever method chosen, thus ends the quest, Unsanctioned Training. Chatting again with Athris and asking her for more duties, she tells me that a scholar named Itermuril needs an escort to the village of Pelagiad. However, Rhaenys would like his notes. Inquiring further about it, she tells me that the Altmer had just arrived in Balmora, and that he doesn't know his way around the land yet. He needs an escort to the halfway tavern. Oddly, she then mentions that she doesn't care if he makes it there alive or not, and that all she wants is a copy of his notes. Itermuril is apparently waiting for me at the 8 Plates. Exiting the hall and running 2 doors down, the High Elf was standing at the entrance of the inn. Speaking with him, he asked if I was his guide, and if so, he was ready to travel together. I told him to follow me, and we began our trek over to Pelagiad. Just before hitting Fort Moonmoth, I stopped the journey for a second and asked about his notes. He said it was refreshing to see a young Breton so interested in scholarship, but he just can't hand them out to anybody. He does mention though that after his safe arrival in Pelagiad, he might reconsider. Continuing with the trip, the roads were relatively safe, and the path forward was simple enough. Again, there are a few options when it comes to retrieving Itermuril's notes for Rhaenys. The first and most straightforward one is to kill him. Striking him down in the wilderness, you'll get access into his inventory, which holds a few scrolls, potions, and above all else, the coveted notes. Another option is to pickpocket them, which could be done before, during, or after the journey. The last option is to safely bring him to the halfway tavern. As soon as the two of you enter inside, you'll receive a journal update and Itermuril can be spoken with. He thanked me and called me an excellent guide. Asking again for his notes, he says that due to my generosity, promise within the guild, and enthusiasm towards his research, he'll gladly hand them over as a sign of gratitude. Curious as to what all the hubbub was regarding his work, I peeked at his research, and most interestingly, it was based on the persistence of Oblivion streams, the very same topic that Manwë was studying out in the Punabi caves. I wondered if there was any connection between the two of them, and if perhaps he was one of the colleagues that she spoke of. Regardless, notes in hand, I recalled back to the hall and spoke with Rhaenys. She asked where the research was, and I handed it over. She called my efforts good work, and with that, thus ends the quest, Escort Itermuril. Talking again with Athris and asking her for more duties, she shared her concerns and beliefs that Tasphi Ashibael of Margon has been practicing necromancy. Inquiring further, she puts it plain and says that my job is to go to the town, find Tasphi, and kill her, as necromancy is not tolerated. Exiting the conversation, I took the Siltstrider to Aldrune and then again to Margon. Singling out a Redoran guard, I asked him where Ashibael's house was, and he told me that it was the last one on the right, just before reaching the shrine. Locating it and entering inside, for fun, I cased the house in search of any necromancer paraphernalia. Everything seemed normal and in check. As well, Tasphi was pretty calm and friendly. Speaking with her, I came out the gate with the necromancy accusations. She was taken aback and insisted that she wasn't one. She then asked who could have suggested such a thing, and this is where there are 2 different prompts to choose from. By telling her it isn't her concern, Tasphi says that anyone in the village can speak for her and clear her name. By telling her it was Rhaenys, Ashibael replied that it all made sense now. She'd apparently refused to join the guild and picked the practice of healing those in need instead. Tasphi claims that it's due to that reason and her birth status that Rhaenys has it out for her. She finishes by saying that she might know a way out of this situation. Again, there are two different conversation prompts to pick from. One is to work with her, and the other is to carry out your original task. By choosing the latter, she summons an ancestral spirit and turns hostile. By taking out her and her ghost, there's nothing really telling on her body to determine whether or not she was actually a necromancer. Now, by choosing the former prompt and working with her, she comes to the idea that it's best for her to leave Vardenfell, especially if Rhaenys has held onto a grudge against her for this long. She says she can travel to the mainland and continue healing in the villages there. All I have to do is lie to Rhaenys and tell her that I killed Tasphi. This spawns the final choice of letting her escape or to strike her down. The latter leads to the same outcome as before, so agreeing to let her go, she says she just needs a few minutes to gather some things, then she's departing for the mainland. Recalling back to Rhaenys and speaking with her, she asked if the citizens of Margon still needed to worry about necromancy. I lied and told her that Tasphi was dead. In an attempt to thank me, she practically let it slip that this was a personal vendetta for her, as she begins to say that I did her a great service before catching her words and swapping out the me with guild. As a reward, she hands me 2 scrolls of elemental burst fire, as well as 2 scrolls of the 4th barrier. With that, thus ends the quest: kill necromancer Tasphi Ashibael. Speaking once more with Rhaenys and asking her for duties, she tells me of her suspicions that the guild has been infiltrated by a Telvanni spy. Intrigued, I inquire to hear more. She directs me to go and learn what I can from the Aldrun, Vivec, and Sadrith Mora halls. When I find the spy, I'm not to take any action against them, and instead report them to Rhaenys. Using the guild teleportation services, I began my search in Aldrun. Starting with Edwina, I asked about any potential spy activity, and she replied that the Mages Guild is very strict with who it lets in, and that a spy could never slip through the ranks. Asking around amongst the other members, they all more or less gave me the same response, that they don't know of any spies within the guild, and those are extreme accusations to make. Once the rounds were completed, I moved on to Sadrith Mora. Again, the Wolverine Hall was pretty ignorant to any suspicious activity. However, when speaking with Skink and Treeshade, he told me something quite interesting. He too suspects that there's a Telvanni spy somewhere within the guild, although he isn't sure who or where they could be. He recommends asking around in the capital, as that's where the guild's decisions are made. Traveling to Vivec, the first person I encountered was Flacasia Faucius, and when asked about the Telvanni spy, she simply responded by saying I should ask Trebonius. Trebonius Artorius is the archmage of the guild, and this was the first time I had gotten around to speaking with him. When asked about the spy, he insisted that there couldn't be one, as he would have known about them right away. He then says that his Dunmer advisor, Tiram Gadar, is always keeping an eye out for any suspicious activity. Inquiring further about this advisor, Trebonius raves about him, saying that he helps with every single decision the guild makes, aids the faction in seeing the Dunmer side of things, and best of all, he came in with some amazing credentials. When asked about these credentials, the Archmage locates them and hands them over, citing that it's a letter from Okato himself. Taking a peek at it, it was brief and straight to the point. There wasn't much to it other than a simple recommendation, except the last portion was certainly of interest. Okato's name was spelt wrong. It had an A in the beginning instead of an O and included 2 T's instead of 1. Alarm bells going off, I figured I had found my Telvanni spy. Curiously, I wanted to try and confront Tiram. He was standing across from Trebonius, so I went up to him and asked about the Telvanni spy. He said he didn't know who it could be, and told me of his role and great importance within the guild, saying that I should just take a look at his credentials. When questioning them though, and by telling him they seemed suspicious, Tiram threatened to report me to the Archmage for making baseless accusations. A well-played move by him, I then brought them back to Trebonius and tried to convince him that Tiram was the spy. He was quick to anger, didn't believe me, and called Gadar his most trusted advisor. He finished by saying that even though Rhaenys might believe in an accusation like that, he is quote-unquote far more sophisticated. In any case, I returned back to Balmora and presented Atheris with my findings. She was ecstatic with my discovery and called it a shame that the guild was, quote, led by a scuttlehead with no sense or ambition like Trebonius. Rhaenys calls out the credentials as being a poor forgery and spots the exact same mistakes I did. As a reward, she gives me 2 scrolls of Summon Golden Saint and the enchanted Daedric Dagger of Soul Drinker. Soul Drinker has the enchantment of Soul Trap for 30 seconds on touch. Now, interestingly, there is an alternative ending to this quest. Reverting back to having just received Tyrum's credentials and speaking with Trebonius about a potential Telvanni spy, you can actually lie and say that Rhaenys Athris was the spy. This baseless accusation is the one he actually believes in. He drops some lore that apparently the Telvanni did something bad to her parents when she was younger, which explains her hatred towards them. Trebonius then recounts her actions against Larar Bariloth and giving him the ultimatum of join or die. Funny enough, he ends by saying that Tyrum told him the Dunmer were unhappy with some of her recent decisions, and says that she will be expelled immediately. Returning back to the Balmorra Hall, Rhaenys is indeed gone. Although, for other reasons, one could make the argument that her means and methods for success are questionable and may not morally align with the guild. Like how she acted with Intermural's notes, Manwë's dues, and Tasphi's alleged ties to necromancy. Regardless, take your pick as to which method you'd prefer, but my canon event was reporting Tyrum back to Athris. With that, thus ends the quest, Catch a Spy. Speaking once more with Rhaenys, I asked her for more duties, and she informed me that that was officially it for her, as she had nothing left to offer in terms of guild work. So, using the teleportation services, I traveled over to Aldrune and spoke with Edwina Elber. Rising to the rank of Evoker, I asked for advancement to Conjurer. Edwina informed me that I'd need to start paying guild dues if I wanted to reach that rank. Choosing to pay up 200 septums, I was now able to receive more work from her. Edwina informed me that she was at a delicate phase of her research, and, in turn, needed to get a hold of and study a Dwemer tube. Inquiring about this piece, she said that they're easy enough to find, and that she even saw one in Arkanthunch Sturdums. Agreeing to run this errand for her, she gave me directions to the aforementioned Dwemer ruin. Exiting the guild hall, I took the Siltstrider over to Nissus. From the town, I located Aldvelothi to the north, and began leaping and levitating my way in that direction. Albert quoted Arkanthunch as being west of the small town, and sure enough, I soon spotted the long metal bridge leading straight into the ancient ruins. Entering inside of Sturdums, I was immediately faced with dwarven centurions. After taking them out, I got to battle against a dwarven spectre, which I thought was pretty cool, and it was my first time encountering one. Working through the dungeon, the enemies were pretty plain and straightforward. More spiders, spheres, and steam centurions. There were only a few rooms to clear out, and the ruin itself wasn't very big. Once everything was taken care of, I found the dwarven tube for Edwina and recalled back to Aldrune. Elbert asked me if I had found her desired item yet, as she simply could not continue with her research otherwise. Handing it over, she said that she could finally research something that the Dwemer kept writing about, called Thurks. With that, thus ends the quest, Dwemer Tube from Arkanthunch Sturdums.